Okay. Hello, am I live? Welcome, everyone. We are thrilled to have you at our webinar. We're going to give it another minute before we officially kick off, but huge welcome from myself and the team at FCM. We're thrilled that you are joining us today. And for those of you who are just coming in, please go ahead. We'll start engagement early. So please put into our chat where you are joining us from. City, country, wherever you are based. I am here in our Philadelphia office in the US. I joked earlier with our team that no, I did not have this installation put into my living room. So I am in our office with the rest of our team here in Philadelphia. But go ahead while we get settled and before we kick off and let us know where you're dialing in from. Okay. Toronto and Germany. Fantastic. Lovely. We're hoping to see a pretty global audience today. So this is so far so good. Wonderful. Okay. No one be shy. Great. This is coming in. Very good. We'll just give it one other minute before we do kick off. We have a lot to cover. I'm sure we could be here all day, but we won't be, fear not. But we're thrilled to have you guys, so thank you. Okay. That is great. Okie dokie. Well, we will go ahead now and get started. So I'm just going to wait here and make sure that our slides are appearing on the screen, just to our production team. Wonderful. Okay, this was not going to be a one-man band. So I am thrilled to welcome my colleague, Nikki Ping, who manages our global distribution and content strategy. So Nikki, thank you so much for joining. Welcome.
Thank you, Lindsay. Great to be here.
Wonderful. So this is part 2 of a webinar series that we are producing. It's called Unplugged, brought to you by FCM. And today we're diving into the basics of NDC, which is a very hot topic. It continues to be in the world of business travel. So the purpose of today's session, it's to help you answer some questions that you have to kind of set a framework, a foundation for NDC and the way in which you can simplify, if that's possible, NDC in your program, and particularly conversations that you're having with different suppliers. We thought that this would be timely given the events that we have coming up, the industry events. So we're very much looking forward to the Business Travel Show Europe taking place in London next week, and then the annual GBTA convention taking place in Denver mid-July. FCM Flight Center will be there, will be present. We'd love to have conversations with you, but if you're going to be there, please throw that into the chat as well. It's always fun to see who's going to be at these different events, but we do want you to be prepared. So whether it's in preparation for these events, whether it's in preparation for conversations that you are having with supplier partners or prospective supplier partners, we have you covered. Now, just a few housekeeping notes before we formally kick off. Thanks very much to all of you who submitted questions into our registration in advance. We will do our best to get through all of those. We've incorporated some of those into the contents of what we plan to present and share with you today. For any of our FCM customers, we are also thrilled to have you guys with us, so thank you. But if there were more account-specific questions, we did pass those to your account manager, and they would go ahead and reach out to you so that you can make sure that you're having those conversations. We will save the last 15 minutes for Q&A, so feel free to get active in the chat. I don't think I saw anything come through around who's going to GBTA or BTS. So I hope that it's not just Nikki and I attending. Just kidding. It's not just Nikki and I attending. But if you are going to be there, feel free to throw that in there. And we will have time for those other questions as we continue on with the content and at the end of today's session. So I am thrilled to, we've met Nikki. For those of you who I've maybe not met, my name is Lindsay Straub, Global Head of Sales for FCM. And NDC is a topic that we have been talking about for many years now. And we are very, very fortunate. Nikki's like our secret weapon. She is proficient in this space. She is our guru. And she has this wonderful way of really breaking down NDC to a point that we can digest it, we can action it, and we can learn most efficiently about it. So with that, we will go ahead and dive in. Now, before we get to any level of granularity, we thought that it was important to take a step back and to really give some context. So my first question over to Nikki is, why does NDC exist, right? I'm not saying that we had this wonderful landscape and we didn't need it, but it certainly came onto our radar for a reason. So Nikki, can you give us some background and context there?
Yeah, absolutely, Lindsay. Thank you for the intro. It is a valid question because it does seem to have been a topic of conversations in the industry for quite a long time. So to give you a bit of a background on NDC, this was very much an airline-led initiative when it first started more than 10 years ago. And it came from, I guess, a point of frustration from airlines. And at that time, 10 years ago, I was actually at an airline. I used to work for British Airways based in the UK. And airlines were quite frustrated in that their competitor set was changing. More and more low-cost carriers will become relevant in the market. And airlines had done a great job of improving how they sold their content online on their own websites to travelers directly. And so they could sell more product. It looked a lot better. It was a much better customer experience. But really, airline websites can only go so far. So airline websites typically tend to be strong in an airline's home market. And also they tend to be quite leisure focused. And so the untapped market really that airlines were trying to really fix problems in were the areas overseas. So for an airline like British Airways, for example, it's normal for customers to go onto the website on ba.com in the UK, but you can't expect customers all over the world to do that. But also the corporate travel space, which is complex, was really not seeing the benefits of this transition that the airlines had done on their .com. And so there was no longer a level playing field. And so airlines traditionally distribute content to those harder to reach areas, so the overseas markets and the corporate market, via one of the three main GDS systems, so Amadeus, Sabre, and Travelport, which are very large, they're very scalable, but they were not without their own problems. The traditional way of distributing content was not a graphical interface. It was a black and green screen with lots of letters and numbers that couldn't show a customer what something looked like in the way a website could. It was limited to 26 letters of the alphabet for prices, where the new low-cost carriers had lots more. And importantly, the actual selling message to the customer was being translated from this weird coding language to the customers by the travel agents. So airlines started to address these problems, as I said, on their .com, but they also wanted to do it in the third party. So the three areas really that airlines were frustrated around was firstly the control. They wanted to make sure that the products that they had to sell were being surfaced up to the traveler as they wanted it. So the fare rules were clear, what the inclusions were and everything like that were very clear, so that travel agents didn't make a mistake. They wanted to give information about the onboard product and the fare rules. And also they wanted to be able to have a lot more than the traditional price points. The customer experience, the traditional black and green screens, they can sell a flight to a customer, but they can't show it with pictures or rich content. So they wanted an alternative. And in reality, these traditional distribution systems were also really quite expensive, a massive cost in some cases for large airlines. So as airlines have kind of transitioned, they've also used this technology as a way to negotiate new commercials with third parties. So we summarize the why into those three reasons. It's the cost, the control, and the customer experience, all driven from an airline perspective.
Okay, thank you. So now that's the why. Some people, I am sure, don't always feel comfortable asking this question, so I'll ask it on their behalf. What actually is NDC?
Okay, so we had this problem where I mentioned sort of 10 years ago, and airlines started to want to fix the problem. IATA, which is the International Air Transport Association, which is effectively the governing body of the airline industry, they stepped in and they said to airlines, do you know what, if you all do your own thing, this is going to be very difficult to actually achieve what you want as your end goal. It will be a complete mess. So why don't we, as the governing body, set some standards for this new language? And effectively, that is what NDC is. It's the transmission standard for how airlines distribute their content to third parties. So it's not a platform, it's not software, and it certainly isn't a database. It's just a new language. So the old language, that black and green screen, which you might have seen, we call it Edifact. The new language is NDC XML. That's just the way it is. And so all it is this brand new language. And it's a series of messages to make sure that the code is the same. Now, this was a good thing from an IATA perspective. I have to say that over time, there has been a lot of criticism. The thing is that, as we now know, looking back on it, that the airlines and IATA did this a little bit in isolation, and they didn't have a great understanding of how corporate travel works. And that's why it's taken such a long time. But if we sort of jump ahead to, I would say, 2019, that was really the first time that everyone from a corporate travel perspective started to work together. So that's the airline, the global distribution system, the online booking tool, the TMC, and in some cases, the corporate travel manager, all started to work together and talk about how complex corporate travel is. And we've worked together for a long time now, and we have really tackled the difficulties and the problems. You may have heard that every airline is doing something different from an NDC perspective. That's probably a slight exaggeration. It is certainly not identical, but that is your TMC's job to sort that out. So getting up to speed is understanding that NDC is just the language. You can't really see it because it's just code, but now understanding what it does and what it delivers to you in your program is more important than really worrying about the standard.
So, and I may be jumping ahead a little bit, Nikki, but if I'm a travel buyer and I want to learn more and understand more about the options that my program may or may not have with NDC, should I be going to my TMC or should I be going to my airline partners?
I would say that probably your TMC, because your TMC is the one that understands your program better. And airlines, of course, they have a very flight-centric view of the world. As we know, within a corporate travel program, there's hotels, there's car hire, there's trains, there's all of these other things, and there's policy and things like that. The airlines, although they're learning a lot more about complexities of travel from a corporate perspective, they can't answer all of those questions. And I think that also it depends on the size of the corporate customer, because if you are truly massive as a global corporate buyer, you would have somebody dedicated to you within an airline who probably can help answer your questions. But not all corporations have got a direct relationship with somebody within the airline who would be able to answer those questions. That's not true of the TMC, because the TMC always is used to working with the corporate travel manager, I think.
Yes. No, those are very valid points, especially as it relates to the other categories of a travel program that are and will be further impacted by NDC. It's really, to your point, not only airlines. Okay, so now we know what it is. We have some of the context around the why. But can you talk to us a little bit about what it is that NDC is trying to achieve in this landscape?
Yep. So NDC effectively it's the opportunity for an airline to tackle those problems that we talked about. So NDC is, because it's the code, it's a lot more flexible and it's a lot more modern. It enables the airline to transition away from a world of 26 price points to unlimited prices, ancillary, and content that changes a lot more. I mean, the idea now that fares are static in an airline world seems crazy, but actually it still is not really that long ago that an airline used to file a fare and it would sit there untouched for a really long time. That really does seem strange, but the airline industry has taken a long time to evolve. So NDC gives more the ability for the airline to distribute more content and more price points, but also because it's not all static content, in order to get an answer from an airline on how much is it going to cost me to go from New York to Miami, we have to ask the airline that question every time we want to know the answer. And when we ask the question, the airline knows who's asking. And that gives the airline the ability to respond back with content that is relevant to not only the question, but relevant to who's asking. So that it could be perceived as both a positive and a negative, because as a corporate travel manager, I have seen the need where corporate travel managers have had to remind airlines on more than one occasion that actually the person who is the buyer in this instance is the person paying. It's not necessarily always just the person sitting on the plane. And so some travel managers are nervous that personalization means that travelers are going to be surfaced up content that looks very appealing, but it isn't within the travel policy and things like that. So there is definitely some sort of a nervousness around it. But actually, in the vast majority of cases, what we see of the benefit of that is if they know who's shopping and you can tell them who the TMC is, who the corporation is, and this is the frequent traveler number of this traveler. If that traveler has got a frequent flyer status that enables them to have a free seat, take an additional bag, get priority boarding, that means that the airline doesn't get the ability to sell that content to the traveler at that point where they already get it. Nothing is more frustrating as a traveler, I'm sure, than being tried to be sold content that you already get for free because you're already a gold card holder with that airline or whatever. So it does give us the ability to really address those problems. Now, as airlines transition, and they are transitioning, NDC is not mandatory, and there are a lot of big airlines who have not even started in this journey yet. They need to choose people to work with them to help them in this transition. So each airline will choose an IT provider. And IT providers are names that you may well have heard, like Fairlogics or Acelia or Altea. And that they're the ones who help the airline on their journey to this transition. And as a TMC, how to consume the content is also something that we have to take into account from achieving the goals of NDC. So there are decisions that need to be taken around using an aggregator or a direct connect. There are also a lot of moving parts in this decision, and it can vary for each TMC by geography, by airline, by online booking tool. But I guess really what is really important for you is to understand that the partners you choose in this journey understand what the goals of NDC are, what your travel policy is all about, and bringing the two together. That's really what we want.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about why this truly matters to a corporate travel program. And I think that what we'll find is that there are varying levels based on your program. But if we look at our industry, there's varying levels of maturity of NDC across the board, right? But we have come a long way in theory over the last 10 years. How would you temperature check or grade us as an industry in terms of awareness, adoption? Like, are we excelling? I think I know the answer to this. But where would you put us in terms of the, again, awareness, adoption, so on and so forth of NDC?
Well, when I was at school, we used to get a while ago now, we used to get two grades. We used to get a grade for effort and a grade for achievement. So I think nobody can deny that there has been a lot of effort. There's been a lot of time, effort, energy, and in fact money spent on this transition. The achievement is probably not in the A star rating quite at the moment, but it is definitely on that upward trajectory. And so I think that it is difficult and it is challenging. But I don't know, B, would I give us for achievement? Is a B good?
A B is not bad. That's,
okay.
We of course want, I think a lot of us in this industry, right, where we're your classic type A or overachiever. But I do think that a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it would not have been a B. So to your point,
No.
Investments have been made. There is a lot of awareness. We're, of course, conducting sessions like these for that very reason. But I imagine, and what we're hearing from prospects and from customers, buyers are struggling to understand if they should pay a lot of attention to this, if it does matter to their program. So if we can go back to the slide content, what I'm going to toggle over to is that very question. So, the airlines have worked to build their own solution, but what does that mean to corporate travel, specifically those travel programs and travelers themselves?
Well, so some of these things on this slide actually are problems that we hear in the industry in general, and
right.
As for the buyers who are on the call, they may resonate with some of the things that you hear from your travelers. So around the I can see it cheaper online. Although airlines initially did promise that NDC was going to deliver a lot of personalized content and bundles, in reality, at the moment, NDC is cheaper. That is across the board from all the airlines who are doing it. And there's 3 ways that they can save money and make NDC cheaper. So as I mentioned at the start, NDC is a way of airlines reducing their distribution bills. So for travelers and for travel agents who want to continue to use the old school way of buying content, some airlines have introduced a surcharge to, I guess, firstly cover the cost, but also act as an incentive to move. The European carriers are the most prevalent in this area. British Airways, Lufthansa, Air France, KLM all have surcharges in place. The most recent to introduce this is going to be Qantas on the 1st of July. And so sometimes then if you haven't got NDC in your program, the fare will be cheaper online because there is no surcharge online. The second way is airlines sometimes remove content from traditional channels. Now, the most common example of this is the American carriers who have removed basic economy from the traditional channels. So both United and American have done this, where their basic economy product is no longer distributed through traditional channels. It's available in NDC and is available on the .com. Now, I know that basic economy doesn't necessarily meet the requirements of all of the corporations that want to travel, because the product is obviously basic. But nonetheless, if you're purely looking at a price comparison online, you will see this basic economy product. And so NDC is a way to do that. And then thirdly, they have introduced dynamic or continuous pricing. So now they're no longer constrained by these 26 letters of the alphabet. They can have more prices. So what this effectively means is, rather than the price jumping when one of those old booking classes closes and the next one opens, NDC sort of smooths the path between them. So the prices are much smaller in increments. And so airlines mix and match, and they may use one or all of these strategies. But essentially, for your travelers, this is why the content is perceived as cheaper online. Now, what NDC does for the TMC is enable the TMC to get that content into your travel program, so that the travelers shouldn't see the content cheaper online in as many situations. I'm going to give a bit of a caveat in that in a moment. So I would say that is the biggest thing that we see that NDC addresses, is that it means that travelers don't feel the need to go outside their program anymore, because the best content can be within your program. The second one is the seat. So historically, being able to select and pay for your preferred seat has been pretty tricky through some of the old school technology. Paid ancillaries are now much, much better and much better supported in the world of NDC, whether this is paid seats, bags, Wi-Fi, whatever. They can all be supported in the same channel as the original booking. Not only is this a much better customer experience, but it also makes the expenses process much easier as well, because it's all within one place. And sort of linked to that is the total trip cost visibility, partly because all the ancillaries are one place, but also there's less need to go outside of your preferred channel to get the content. So you won't have bills that are incurred outside of the travel platform and everything. But as I said, the airlines do sometimes still reserve the right to offer cheaper sale fares on their .com. Now, as we know, in many cases, these really cheap sale fares, which are sometimes non-changeable, non-refundable, are not always suitable for corporate travelers. But not all airlines do this. So I think it would be misleading for me to say that NDC is not 100% a guarantee that you will never find a cheaper fare online, because that just is not true, because some airlines reserve the right to have cheaper fares on their .com. And then the last one is, as I mentioned, we have to tell the airline every time we want them to do something. And that means that the airline has more information about who's shopping, and they give us lots and lots of responses back when we ask questions. The traveller chooses the offer that fits their needs the best. But all the information about what the airline returned, what the traveller chose, what they didn't choose, data on paid ancillaries, data on savings and things like that is improving all the time. So data is much, much richer and better as NDC evolves. So it is very important to the corporate travel market. And I think that sort of in relation to your question, particularly with the events coming up, travel managers need to know how to kind of cut through and know from the wheat from the chaff type thing, because making sure that you understand how it's relevant to your program is definitely really important, and not all programs are the same.
And that's the kind of perfect segue. So from a tactical standpoint, some of our listeners are getting ready for these events, or RFP season is coming up, and just general conversations are ongoing with NDC. So what are some of those takeaways? What are some tips, not necessarily tricks, but guidance that we can give to the listeners on how to tackle NDC in these conversations?
So I put these kind of 5 points together. I think that although the history of NDC is never changing, and actually the technical what it is and everything is kind of static information, actually, as we all know, technology itself is advancing, and also airline relationships with third parties also are a bit of a moving feast. So NDC education isn't just a one-off exercise. So airlines change their strategies and who they work with all the time. And I think that what you need to make sure is your TMC and your travel partners should be able to provide you with the latest information on all the carriers that are relevant to your program, especially at the moment while it's still evolving, to make sure that your TMC and their tech stack can account for this. They've got a plan, they've got a backup. So we see time and again that airlines and distribution partners fall out. You need to make sure that you're aware of what the current situation is and what would happen to you and your program if some of those distribution partners no longer worked together in a happy way. And then the second one is about seeing is believing, because in reality, anyone can write anything in an RFP response. So asking for a demo in the tool that you will actually use is really important. And also, I think you should make sure that you ask the criteria for when content will and won't be available. So, for example, if an airline makes an announcement that they have introduced NDC content, typically you will see this all over LinkedIn and there'll be other press releases. Now, turning it on the minute that announcement is made, I would say is probably not great, because as a buyer, you really want your TMC to have properly understood it and tested it to make sure it works for your program. But at the other end of the spectrum, you also don't want a travel partner who is going to refuse to turn on content for a valid reason. It needs to be a conversation. So I think that as a buyer, it's important to see it in the tool that you want to use, but also understand the criteria by which content will and will not be enabled. The third one is not just air. So I said this one for two reasons. Firstly, airlines are offering direct APIs for all of the reasons that we cited. The big hotel chains and European rail, for anyone who is interested in that, it's becoming increasingly complex. So the questions that you are asking for air are also relevant to the questions in those other verticals as well. And secondly, your program isn't just about air. So there is no point having all the NDC content in the world if you can't add a hotel or a car to that same booking, because otherwise your travelers are going to have loads of bookings to juggle and it will be really complicated for them. So make sure that your travel partners can still group the content together in the way that your travelers have really become accustomed to. The next one is about it being overwhelming. And now there is a lot of information out there. And I think that it's important to ask questions to your partners that are relevant to your program. I mean, I have to say that I see a lot of questions, for example, in RFPs that ask which version of NDC is the airline using, who built the NDC connection. And actually, as a corporate travel manager, those questions shouldn't really matter to you if your travel partners are doing their job correctly. What is actually important is, can my travelers shop, book, service? Do they get help when there's disruption? Those are the valid questions to be asking, not the version of NDC that's actually being surfaced up. And I think if you can focus in on what's really key for your program, that will cut a lot of the noise out and it doesn't suddenly become so overwhelming. And the last one is the fact from fiction. There are a lot of rumors and a lot of people's opinions around distribution on LinkedIn, particularly. And you hear things like, you can't change an NDC booking. Well, that's actually not true. NDC servicing works pretty well. So at a high level, we see across FCM globally, we see that old school EDIFACT servicing fails in about 0.5% of cases. NDC is 1.5%. So it kind of backs up that B grade that I gave it. That isn't bad.
It's not bad, right? Okay.
It's not bad. In fact, it's quite good. So can it do everything? No, of course it can't. But it definitely does work. Servicing is supported, and servicing can be much, much better with the new technology than it is in the old school world, particularly servicing after disruption. There's also a lot of rumours and people's opinions on the internet around what is the best way for a TMC to consume NDC. So as a TMC, the decision needs to be taken. Are you going to do lots of direct connects with airlines, or are you going to work with really strong technology partners who can help you get the content to your travelers and your customers that is the most relevant? Now, there is not one right answer to this question, but if you are a corporation that has got a truly global footprint, and within your travel program, there are lots of airlines, the feasibility of doing direct connect for all of that content is not really realistic. It costs a lot of money. And NDC isn't just a one-off integration that you do and then leave it and it never needs touching again. NDC integration needs a lot of maintenance and upgrading. And so direct connect is not necessarily the silver bullet that it sometimes is pushed to or presented to be. So direct connects are not bad. They can be quicker to build for some airlines in some key markets, but it's also important to make sure that you ask the question based on your travel program. So does the direct connect still allow for true comparison shopping across all of the carriers that you're using? Does the direct connect work in the online booking tool that you want to use globally? And actually, what is the opportunity cost to that TMC of doing a direct connect? Because in reality, nobody has got unlimited resources and money to spend on NDC, sadly. Well, maybe not sadly, but nobody's got unlimited funds. So has your TMC decided to prioritize loads of direct connects and not spend money on things like AI enhancements or user experience enhancements? Because there always has to be a choice. And so that's really important to ask those questions around making sure that you understand why your TMC has made the strategic decisions that they have, and does it work for your program? And if airlines are promising specific things in certain channels, have they got a roadmap or any detail on when that will actually happen? Can they give you concrete information? That's the bit that sometimes is a bit flaky and doesn't necessarily always materialize. So these are the things that we sort of put together. Obviously, if people have got other questions that they really want to ask, or they've thought of something that they've heard, then by all means they should pop that in the chat, because we can kind of have a look and see what things people are thinking about.
Yeah, I think Nikki, two of the things that you mentioned, I think are critical. So it's that criteria, when content will and won't be available, and then the serviceability of that, more so than the plumbing and the understanding of that kind of back end. I know you said first stop would be your TMC to understand what is available in the program. That's the entity that should know your program and the partners of your program the best. What other resources would you recommend? Because there's a lot of noise. I know we're joking a little bit about LinkedIn, but there's a ton of content out there. There's the usual suspects, I'm sure, in terms of media outlets, right? We have Business Travel News, GBTA, the company Dime. What are some, if I've missed any, that you'd recommend for resource?
So I think that it probably depends on kind of the question that you're asking, because things like BTN and Company Dime and things like that are really useful sources of information. But they tend to be like here and now because something has been announced or something has happened. I think, industry events are really helpful, because if we talk about BTS and GBTA and other industry events, they often have education sessions where you can dive a little bit deeper. GBTA, for example, obviously we have the annual big conference, but GBTA has lots of chapters where people go along and really try and educate and share. And there's also quite a lot of consulting companies that do things in this space who can really help kind of cut through the noise. At the other end of the spectrum, IATA website does have a lot of information on it, but it's perhaps not the most easy to decipher in terms of what kind of is relevant for the corporation. It's a lot of kind of airline focused documentations and things like that. I think it's you have to just cross-check your facts, maybe. I do see a lot of stuff on LinkedIn, and there's a lot of facts on LinkedIn as well. A lot of consulting companies put some really good information on LinkedIn.
Sure. So we will get into Q&A. We've had some come through on the chat, so thank you guys very much. But I'm going to ask what, again, I think are two obvious kind of quick round questions for Nikki. But is NDC a fad, or is it here to stay?
I think it's here to stay. The airline frustrations are being tackled by the fact that they are addressing the problem. So it's here to stay. We're going to be in a parallel universe for a long time, because, as I said, there are some big airlines that haven't really started. And then, of course, there's the long tail of smaller airlines who definitely haven't started. So, no, it's here to stay.
Okay. NDC, friend or foe?
Friend. Friend to the traveler in times of disruption, without a shadow of doubt. And actually, when those things happen, it's friend to everybody, because you get a better user experience on your online booking tool. Your TMC can spend time focusing on the difficult things where your travelers need help. They don't have to spend time doing simple things, because the tech is much better capable of handling that. So friend.
Great. I was hoping you would say that. Okay, let us get into some of the Q&A. I will start with one that's around FCM and how we manage the connection for NDC with airlines. Kind of a softball question.
So technical connection or relationship question?
That is a good question. It was also worded as, what is FCM's strategy for NDC consumption?
Okay. So I guess the purpose of this was to talk about things from an education perspective, FCM is that we obviously also have worked with globally large numbers of corporations in all corners of the globe. And so in a lot of cases, we work with tech partners, third-party tech partners, to aggregate our content and bring it into the online booking tools that most of our travelers are using. In the case of where we've got travelers using different different online booking tools, then we use a mix of direct connects, we use a mix of different aggregators. So it's really hard to put it on one answer, because it genuinely varies by airline, by customer, and by point of sale. But in a large proportion of cases, we're working with third-party tech companies to surface that content, because that works best for the online booking tools that our customers are using.
Consider that a double dip answer. I think David and Ruth, hopefully that answers both of your questions, but certainly feel free to elaborate in the chat if we've missed something. I will jump over to another question from the chat in terms of, how does NDC impact agreement terms with air carriers, to your knowledge, Nikki? There's been some talk around changes and cancellations being more difficult to manage on NDC.
So changes and cancellations originally were hard. So if you think back to the fact that IATA and airlines had those conversations effectively behind closed doors, and then they tried to offer a product that was similar to their .com. Well, leisure travelers don't really do that many cancellations and changes. So it was an afterthought in reality, and it is harder to deliver. But servicing does work in NDC. Cancellations and refunds work well in the vast majority of cases, and changes also now work well. Where the airline spends the time doing the work, it works. So it's never going to be 100%, but EDIFACT isn't 100%. So that bit definitely isn't true. In terms of our agreement with the airlines, if from our question, our agreement, I think, with the airlines as a result of NDC is different and it's deeper. So historically, I think the TMC relationship with an airline has been much more on a commercial or a contractual basis. Now, we have good relationships with the distribution and the technical teams within those airlines, so that we can really make sure that they understand things really well. And so we have a much broader and a better relationship with the airlines.
Sure. And switching over to a question around cost and really savings, I think we've touted throughout this session that there are cost savings to be had, given that NDC is effectively cheaper. Have we seen tangible evidence where NDC provided a client with actual P&L savings?
Absolutely. Where we have enabled content, and I would say this is particularly true where the content gets turned on in the online booking tool, the uptake is big. It's big and it happens fast. And that is because the traveller themselves sees the cheaper fares and they want to make the right decision for the company. And so they see that content and they book it. And that therefore does translate into a bottom line saving for the corporation. It really does vary on a carrier by carrier basis, and it also varies a little bit on a customer by customer basis. So if we have some customers who have got really lucrative route deals with an airline, sometimes their route deal is still better than NDC content. But on the other hand, where if you've got travelers who are booking a lot more published fare content, that's where the savings really tend to be. I would say sometimes the savings can be, on average, 6 or 7% across the board, which may not sound much on a basic economy ticket, but on a 6% across transatlantic business class is a nice chunky amount of money.
That it is. And I'm sure we'll continue to see more of that, especially as the data becomes richer, right? And what we can capture, what travel programs, travel managers can capture in their program. Okay, another question has come in. Given NDC fares generally have a shorter valid period, sometimes down to 20 minutes, how are you recommending approvals, given approvals in an organization can take... No, don't they all just take a few minutes? An organization can take hours, not minutes.
Okay, so I'm going to try and not get too techy with this, but it's actually is a very valid question. So when we shop, which is when we say to the airline, this is what we want, can you give us a price? When they give us that price, that's when you have 20 minutes or 30 minutes, depending on the airline, to actually create the booking. When you create the booking, in most cases, you can hold the price in the inventory, and normally it's till the end of the day. In some cases, depending on the fare type, it can be 3 days or longer, and it's guaranteed. So what is important is that you do think about this in your program and your policy around approvals, because if you've got people all around the world who have to approve each other's travel, if you can't get it done in the same business day, it needs to kind of speed up a little bit. Where we've got it for 72 hours, we typically haven't seen any problems, but many people are definitely using this as a way to review their travel policy and particularly the approvals, and either move to kind of information type approvals, or in fact, kind of moving and helping AI. AI can really help in this area, because rather than having to actually book the ticket and say it costs $200, can I have approval to fly, which takes time and can get caught up in all the processes. If ahead of time you've got data on your program and you can say, well, actually the average cost for this trip is going to be about 200, can I go ahead anyway? And there's some sort of tolerance built in. That's where AI and NDC can actually work pretty well together, I think. So we're definitely seeing people look at it and tackle it, but 20 minutes is a bit of a fallacy. That's the offer. Once you've created the order, you do have time to run your routines and get approvals and stuff like that.
Okay. Now that's a bit of a good segue into one of the questions that was submitted during registration, but we'd be remiss, I'm sure, not to talk about AI a little bit. So how are AI and NDC transforming the distribution of airline content, particularly with regard to interline agreements and code share flights?
That's a hell of a question. So at the first instance, I would like to say I'm very much still learning about AI. So if anyone's got any really technical questions about AI, then I will certainly send them to somebody who can do a much better job of answering than I can.
Fair.
But I mean, from an AI perspective, I think that what is quite exciting is airlines have had to code for the first time things that used to be done manually. So if you think about back in the day, changes, for example, if you wanted to change a partially flown ticket, it's really quite tricky, because you need somebody sitting there looking at all the proportions of value that are assigned to different segments, what taxes have been exhausted, what haven't. And it's a really quite difficult job, and somebody has always had to sit there and do it. Now, in order to facilitate online exchange in an NDC world, the airlines have had to put all of this into the code, and that means AI can read it. So it can do a much better job of automating things and working really well together. So if you, for example, want to put into your assistant or your chat, can you cancel my booking? Previously, that chat message would have gone to somebody who had to pick it up. Now AI can pick it up and actually facilitate that cancellation for you. You're only going to get £150 back. Are you all right with that? Click yes, and it'll be done. So they do work very, very well together. The second part of that question was more about code sharing and alliances and everything. Now, that's not really, I would say, I haven't really seen any overlap with NDC, but just to give people some reassurances, code share bookings work well in NDC. There's no reason that they shouldn't work well in NDC. We're selling a lot of code share for the airlines that we have already implemented. Traditional interline, where you manually build a ticket, is, I would say, still work in progress. There are a couple of airlines who are piloting this, but it's not really that prevalent in a lot of things that we need to sell in the corporate space. So code share works really well. One area that I am quite excited about is how this is going to improve the customer experience. And I'm sure you have all been frustrated by this. So you have a traveler who books within the One World Alliance, and you've got a mix of British Airways and Qatar and American Airlines flights. And when you try to check in online or choose your seat on the different airlines, it doesn't work. Airlines can use NDC to talk to each other. It doesn't have to just be about talking to third parties. They can talk to each other. So the British Airways API can choose an American Airlines seat and vice versa. You can buy a new Starlink Wi-Fi, I guess, is all free, but you can buy Wi-Fi on Qatar or whatever, all through the one ticket. The customer experience opportunity of NDC is phenomenal within an alliance. So hopefully that is one area it's truly better.
Well, for not being this AI expert, Nikki, well done. One more question, and then we will close out. Here's the question, and then I'll share my thought. But NDC is a strange mix between the airline, TMC, and online booking tool. All appear at different points. How is best to manage this? I think earlier on, Nikki, now this is me, not the question, there was a little bit of finger pointing, right? We don't have this, or they don't have that, or the reason you don't see it is your TMC, but no, actually it's the booking tool. So I can very much understand where this question is coming from as it relates to our ecosystem and how that's being managed and the relationship between all. So how would you address that strange mix?
So you're right. There was finger pointing, and it was because people were discovering things that were being done in a bit of a non-standard way.
Sure.
And so what I think has happened here is that as things have developed and evolved, and we've got more tech savvy within the corporate travel space, we have focused on not the standard of NDC, but building things in a standard way. So, for example, credits on hold. Oh my goodness, what a complicated mess that is. But making sure that the airlines who offer credits on hold do it in a standard way, that then makes it much easier for everybody downstream to do it. So it makes it easier for the airlines to build it. It makes it easier for the OBTs to service it up and the TMCs to handle it. So I think the collaboration has really encouraged us to move away from focusing on standards to focusing on standardization. And so hopefully there's less finger pointing. The more big airlines that are now up and running with NDC, I think we've seen a lot of collaboration and a lot of things have now been resolved. So hopefully that finger pointing is going away.
Let's hope so. Okay, well, Nikki, thank you so much. This was extremely valuable. We hope that our listeners agree. You are a wealth of knowledge and information. And hopefully, as everyone is approaching these events or again, those conversations, you all feel better prepared to do that. So again, myself and Nikki and the rest of our FCM team will be at the Business Travel Show in London next week. We will be at the GBTA convention in Denver. We would love to see you. Please scan the two QR codes there so that you can schedule some time with us, or of course, feel free to reach out directly. But thank you so much. Best of luck.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you.
And everyone have a wonderful rest of your day or your evening. Thank you.
Thank you.